وترت الهاشمية على الهادي وترت الهاشمية نصلي على النبي صبح ومسية نصلي على النبي صبح ومسية.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. In the past episode, alhamdulillah, we discussed the ayah which states the 3 stages within our lives as humans. We said that we go through the stages of childhood, then youthhood, then old age. And we discussed how the ayah itself describes the stage of youth as the stage of strength. The ayah itself says, then made you powerful after the weakness. Then he made you powerful in the stage of youthhood after the weakness of childhood. Then we emphasized the power youth hold. We said that youth run, progress, and innovate in most, if not all, sectors within society, whether that's politics, business, science, medicine. Every sector of society is impacted by the work and productivity of youth. The final point we made is that cultures, religions, and societies throughout time all acknowledge the value of said youth. Now, inshallah, in today's lecture, we will be focusing specifically on Islam's view of this generation. Today, we will focus on dissecting 2 narrations that give us the Islamic view of youthhood. And after dissecting these ahadith, inshallah, we will learn how to implement the actionable lessons that we can derive from these 2 narrations. The first narration that we will dissect that gives us an insight on how Islam views youth is قال أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام شيئان لا يعرف فضلهما إلا من فقدهما الشباب والعافية. 2 things none truly know the value of until they lose them. Imam Ali alayhi salam describes 2 blessings as being divine blessings given to us by Allah. However, humanity, or the majority of us humans, don't acknowledge the value of this blessing until we lose this blessing. Once we lose this blessing, only then do we acknowledge the value of the blessing we once had. The first of these neglected blessings is good health. Most of us don't acknowledge the value and how good it feels to be healthy until we lose our health. Once we fall into illness, once we lose that health that Allah has bestowed upon us, only then do we understand and acknowledge the value of good health. You right now, I'm assuming you're healthy. If you're not, may Allah grant you shifa as soon as possible. But right now, today, this week, this month, have you thanked Allah for the good health that He has bestowed upon you? Have you thanked Allah and acknowledged how good it feels to be healthy? How good it feels to not have a fever, not have a stuffy nose, not have a sore throat? Are you actively thanking and acknowledging the blessing that Allah has given you, the blessing of good health? I myself personally, when I'm sick, I look back at the time of good health, and only then do I acknowledge how good it feels to be healthy. And then most of us, when we do get healed of this sickness, we go back to neglecting our good health. We don't thank Allah for the health that we have. Now, what is the actionable lesson that we can take from this portion of the hadith? Right now, thank Allah for the health you have. Throughout your days, throughout your weeks, throughout the months, remember and acknowledge the value of good health. Thank Allah wholeheartedly for having good health. Don't wait until you're sick to then acknowledge the value of good health. Now, what would be the result of doing so? What would be the result of consistently thanking Allah for the blessing of good health that He has given you? Allah within the Holy Quran says, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. When your Lord declared that if you be grateful, I will increase your blessings. If you become among the minority of people who are grateful to Allah for their good health throughout the year, whether they are healthy or sick, Allah will increase this blessing. This is the first blessing that Imam Ali alayhi salam describes as a neglected blessing. The second blessing Imam Ali alayhi salam describes as a neglected blessing, which most of us humans don't understand and thank Allah for until we have lost that blessing, is youth. Right now, you as a person in your teens, 20s, or 30s, are you actively grateful for the youthful energy Allah has given you? Are you thankful for the potential and strength Allah has given you within these years? Most of us don't. Most people don't understand the value of youth and that youthful energy and potential until they have lost their years of youth. Once they enter, their 40s, 50s, 60s, once they enter old age, only then do they look back at their years of youth and acknowledge the value in the years of youth that they possessed. And this reality, this fact that most youth don't acknowledge the value of their years of youth until they enter old age, causes two things. First, because we don't acknowledge the value of our youth, we spend our time meaninglessly. We spend the prime years of our lives without a goal, without a purpose. And this breeds in us a sense of emptiness and depression. Why do so much youth, especially now, suffer from depression, or they feel like they have no goal or purpose and they have a sense of emptiness? Why is this the case? One of the reasons is because we don't understand the potential and power that we have in our youth. We don't understand the energy, power, and potential we have in this stage. Therefore, we spend our youth meaninglessly, without a goal, without searching for a goal or purpose, and that breeds in us a sense of depression and emptiness. If we understood and acknowledged the value of our youth, we would spend these years productively, with a goal, with a purpose, and that would eliminate the sense of depression and that sense of emptiness that we youth feel. I was scrolling on TikTok myself when this video popped up on my feed, which I think describes what a lot of youth in this day and age are going through and are suffering from.
I spent so much of my life doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. I haven't talked about this yet. I didn't do any school. I couldn't tell you what I did. I have gaps in my memory. I mean that. I did nothing, dude. I did absolutely nothing. I would literally do nothing for days on end. And I know there's people somewhere who are like, yeah, like I do nothing. I had nothing to occupy my time. And I'm so regretful that I wasted so much time. I wish that I had started investing time into my hobbies and my passions earlier. I wish I invested any time into something just so that I can know what I was passionate about, but I had no idea. I thought I was bad at everything my entire life because I never put effort into anything. Go and do something. Otherwise, you're going to miss an entire period of your life. It's going to be empty and blank, and you're going to feel psychotic. You're going to feel insane.
Now, this is a TikTok video. We can't bring this as a proof for anything. They could be exaggerating. The TikTok comments could be fake. It could be exaggerations. It could be bots. So let's look at the stats. The Harvard Graduate School of Education found that 3 in 5 young adults felt their lives lacked meaning and purpose. Brothers and sisters, 60% of us youth, of us shabab, say that we have no goal or purpose. Now, again, this has many causes, one of them being that we don't understand the value of our youth. Therefore, we spend it without a goal, without a purpose, and that breeds in us this sense of emptiness and depression. Take, for example, money. If you don't understand the value of money, you're going to spend it mindlessly. And if you spend it mindlessly, it will breed in you a sense of emptiness, and you won't enjoy the money that you have. The same with youth. If you don't understand the value of your youth, you're going to spend these years mindlessly, without a goal, without a purpose, and doing so will breed in you a sense of emptiness, and you won't enjoy the years of youth that you have. So we as youth, we must first understand the value of the years we are living, understand the potential and what we can accomplish within the years of youth. We must do so before reaching old age, as soon as possible. Once we do so, once we understand what we can accomplish in our years of youth, and we understand the value of our youth, then we must search for a goal, a purpose, a career path to work towards. One that preferably serves the community, helps your family, and serves Allah and the Ahl al-Bayt. Shabab, wallah, it's scary for us to be 24, 25, 26, 27, and we still don't know what we want to do with our lives. We are spending the prime years of our lives without a goal, without a greater purpose. Now, if you are in this situation, you shouldn't give up, alhamdulillah. Like we said in the past episode, we as youth, our strong suit is that we have time. We have time to experiment. Go out, experiment, Figure out what you're good at, figure out your goal, your purpose, your why, and work towards it. Now, you're going to fail multiple times. You're going to change your goal. You're going to change your career path multiple times, and that's fine. Because like we said, we have time. But don't stop searching. Don't stop experimenting. Figure out what you want to do as soon as possible. The faster you figure out your goal, the more years of youth you can spend towards achieving that goal. And the more years of youth you spend towards reaching a goal, the more likely you will succeed. For example, if you are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and you know what your goal is, you can spend the next 10 to 15 years of youth towards reaching that goal. Whereas if you figure out what you want to do in your mid or late 30s, you don't have much of that youthful energy and strength and potential to put towards reaching that goal. Our greatest superpower is knowing what we want to do as soon as possible. This is the first thing that is caused by us youth not understanding the value of our youth, which is that we spend these years mindlessly, and this breeds in us a sense of emptiness and depression. The second thing that is caused by us youth not understanding the value of the years we are living until we enter old age is that it fuels the age-old tension, clash, and feud between the younger generation, those in their youth, and the older generation. We as youth, we don't acknowledge the value of our youth, so we spend our youth mindlessly. Whereas those that have entered old age, our parents, our grandparents, they have lived their years of youth. And because they have lost their years of youth and they have entered old age, they acknowledge how much potential youth have. They acknowledge the value of the years of youth. Therefore, those in old age consistently urge us youth to spend our time productively, with a goal, with a purpose in mind. And us youth would much rather spend it mindlessly because we don't acknowledge the value and what we can accomplish within these years. You see parents urging their kids to, take college or university seriously, whereas their kids who are young adults would much rather spend their time in school, having fun, partying, without working towards a greater goal or purpose. You see parents urging their kids to get a job or get an internship, but their kids would much rather stay at home gaming or doing anything else. This is the first narration that describes Islam's view of this stage. It describes it as a blessing which most don't understand the value of until they have lost it. The second hadith that we will dissect today that also gives an insight on how Islam views and values youth is a narration from the Holy Prophet. إن العبد لا تزول قدماه يوم القيامة حتى يسأل عن عمره فيما أفناه وعن شبابه فيما أبلاه. A servant's feet will not move on the day of resurrection until he is asked about his life, how he spent it, and about his youth, how he wore it out. This hadith explains how much Islam and Allah values what we spend our youth on. Allah, on the Day of Judgment, brothers and sisters, will hold me and you accountable for what we spent our years of youth on. Are we ready to stand in front of the Almighty Creator and answer Him regarding this question? Allah will stand in front of you and tell you, what did you spend the years of youth on? What did you spend the prime years of your life prioritizing? Some will come like Allam al-Hilli, Ridwanullah ta'ala alayh, and say, I dedicated my life towards serving, spreading, and learning the knowledge of Ahl al-Bayt. Some will come and say, I studied to become a doctor, I served my community, I provided for my family, and what I had on the side, for example, I gave for the sake of Ahl al-Bayt. Prepare yourself to stand in front of Allah and answer what you spent your youth on. Unfortunately, many of us youth don't live like we will be held accountable for what we are spending our youth on. We don't have any sense of urgency. We feel like, we can live out the years of youth without any judgment or accountability, just have fun. So from today, if you don't have a goal, set yourself a goal that when Allah asks you on the Day of Judgment, what did you prioritize in your youth? You won't hesitate to answer. You will say, oh Allah, I spent my years of youth prioritizing my community, prioritizing worship, prioritizing Ahl al-Bayt. Can you stand in front of the Almighty Creator on the Day of Judgment and say, oh Allah, I lived out my youth and I thought I had time, so I spent my youth, the prime years of my life, I spent all my youthful energy meaninglessly, gaming, partying, having fun, without a goal, without a purpose. Or even worse, oh Allah, I spent my years of youth, the prime years of my life, on sin. And another hadith that holds the same meaning but goes a little bit more in depth, Abu Abdullah al-Sadiq says, among the advice Luqman gave his son was, my son, know that tomorrow when you stand before God, you will be asked about 4 things. Allah on the Day of Judgment will hold us accountable for 4 things. Let's live like we know on the Day of Judgment Allah will come and hold us accountable when it comes to these 4 things. First, what you earned your wealth from. Be careful what your sources of income are. Make sure before pursuing any source of income that it is halal. Now, back then it was a lot simpler. The common ones were, don't steal, don't take bribes, don't deal in interest, and that was pretty much it. But now, mashallah, we have so many different new, nuanced sources of income, and some forms of these incomes that are widespread among youth are haram. Now there is crypto, day trading, NFTs, coins, sports betting apps, and most of the people entering these new sources of incomes and pursuing them are youth. And they do so before asking the Islamic ruling behind this source of income. Before seeking any source of income, make sure that source of income is halal. The second thing that we will be held accountable for on the Day of Judgment is what you spent your money on. Right now, you made sure to earn that halal income. After earning it, can you spend it whichever way you like? No. There are things that are haram for you to spend your money on, and there are things that are wajib for you to spend your money on. Among the things that are wajib to spend your money on is khums. Brothers and sisters, please make sure you are paying your khums. This is haqqullah. Calculate how much you owe and pay it. Don't keep postponing it today, tomorrow. Sit down, calculate how much you have to pay and pay it. Especially for youth. It's very common for youth nowadays to not pay their khums. Wallah, it's not worth it for you to ruin your future, whether that is in this dunya or the hereafter, for a couple extra dollars. Another thing that is wajib for you to pay is nafaqah. If you are a man that has a family, has a wife and kids, it's wajib on you as a man within the Islamic faith to provide for that family. You have to provide the necessities like food, water, clothes, shelter. If you don't pay for these necessities, Allah will hold you accountable on the Day of Judgment. It's wajib on you to pay khums and nafaqah. So we must make sure that we know where it is obligatory for us to spend and we spend that money, and we must know where it is haram for us to spend money and we don't spend money there. Everything that we spend our money on, we will be held accountable for on the Day of Judgment. Keep this in mind on a daily basis. The third question that we will be questioned on the Day of Judgment by the Almighty Creator is your life, what you spent it on. Allah gave us 70, 80, 90, 100 years of life. Within these years of life, He has showered us with blessings. He has given us everything that we have. Endless, endless blessings. The Holy Quran states, and if you count God's blessings, you will not be able to number them. Allah has given us an endless amount of blessings within this lifetime. You will be held accountable how you spent your life. What did you prioritize in your life? What did you spend these blessings that Allah has given you on? Allah has given you the ability to see. He has given you eyes. Did you use these eyes to listen to His commands? Did you read Quran? Or did you, with the same blessing that Allah gave you, sin, disobey Him? Brothers and sisters, one of the ways that we can condition ourselves to stay away from sins is to think about it in this way. Allah has given us everything. He has gifted us all the blessings we have. We as humans, when we sin, we use the same body, the same gifts, the same sight and energy and strength that Allah has gifted us to disobey Him. When you think about it this way, you understand how severe the issue is and how disgusting it is to sin. Imagine right now, you give a friend a present, you give him a gift, and he uses that gift to disobey you. And this concept has been mentioned in different supplications. For example, وَأَسْتَغْفِرُكَ لِلنَّعَمَ الَّتِي مَنَنْتَ بِهَا عَلَيَّ فَقَوَيْتُ بِهَا عَلَى مَعَاصِيكَ. And I ask you for forgiveness for the blessings you have bestowed upon me, with which I became empowered to disobey you. We use the same blessings that Allah has given us to sin, to disobey Him. We will be asked on the Day of Judgment what we spent Allah's blessings on, what we spent the 70, 80, 90 years of life prioritizing. The fourth and final question that this hadith states we will be asked on the Day of Judgment is what you spent your youth on. Allah has given us 10 to 15 years of youthful energy, power, and potential. What did we do within these years? Can we as youth stand in front of Allah and answer this question? Now, there's a very important point that we must explain within the two narrations that we stated. Both narrations state that you will be asked about what you spent your life on. Then for a second time, Allah states that you will be asked about how you spent your youth. Why does Allah emphasize our years of youth for a second time? The question regarding our life, what we spent our life on, includes stages of childhood, youthhood, and old age. Why does Allah specifically emphasize what we spend our years of youth on for a second time? This indicates that what we spend our years of youth on are more important in the eyes of Allah. That's why He specifically emphasizes what we spend our years of youth on for a second time. Now, why are our years of youth and what we spend our years of youth on more emphasized and more important in the eyes of Allah? There are two ways we can answer this question, or two ways of phrasing the same answer. The first answer is that the stage of youth is the most critical stage within our life. Why? Because we have the power within that stage to make and instill change. Within the years of childhood and old age, we don't have that strength. We lose that strength and we fall into weakness, like we said, the ayah describes. And to a certain degree, because a person that is in old age or is in childhood, because they are weaker, they are to a certain degree excused. However, you as youth, you have power to instill change towards good or towards bad. This makes the stage of youth the most critical stage. If you spend your years of youth mindlessly, Allah will hold you accountable on the Day of Judgment. I gave you power and energy to make a difference. Why didn't you? This is one way to answer the question why Allah views the years of youth and what we spend it on as more important. Because the years of youth are the most critical stages within our lives. One that we have strength, the most amount of strength and energy, and we will be held accountable for this amount of strength, energy, and potential. What did you do with these abilities that Allah has given you? The second answer that we can provide for why Allah views what we spend our years of youth on as more important, hence He specifically emphasizes it in questioning on the Day of Judgment, is that within our years of youth, it's harder to be religious. Therefore, because it is harder, it deserves a higher reward, and therefore it is more important in the eyes of Allah. Let's go through this step by step. The first step, according to many narrations, الثواب بالمشقة, which means the reward of an action is dictated by how hard it is. And this is a principle that is backed by common sense and our natural instincts and fitrah. If you see a person working harder towards reaching a goal and someone working less hard, your logic and common sense says that the person working harder deserves a higher reward. The second step, for us youth, it's much harder to be religious due to strong lust, strong desires, urges, our rebellious nature, peer pressure, and generally the environment which encourages sin is much stronger in our years of youth. Due to these factors, it's objectively harder for youth to be religious. And therefore, since it is harder to commit good deeds and be religious in our years of youth, it deserves a higher reward and it is seen as greater in the eyes of Allah. When a person enters old age, those urges, desires, and lust weaken. Therefore, it is much easier for them to be religious. And because it is easier to be religious, it deserves less reward and it is of less importance in the eyes of Allah. Now, stats also prove this. Because it's harder for youth to stay religious and easier for those who are older, we see elders are more often religious than youth. The Pew Research Center, in a report titled The Age Gap in Religion, states that adults younger than 40 are less likely than older adults to say religion is very important in their lives. This age gap in religiosity and the dip in religiosity when a person enters youthhood and this gain in religiosity when a person enters old age, one of the causes of it is that it is objectively easier to be religious in old age than it is in youth. And because it is harder for us youth to be religious in our years of youthhood, Allah gives us a higher reward for religiosity in youthhood, and our actions are of much more importance in the eyes of Allah. Now, do we have ahadith that say Allah values the action of youth more than the actions of those who enter old age? Of course we do. We have multiple ahadith that give a special status or a special reward only for religious youth, which proves that the deeds of youth are greater than the deeds of those in old age. إن الله تعالى يباهي بالشاب العابد لملائكته ويقول انظروا إلى عبدي ترك شهوته من أجلي. Indeed, Allah the Exalted boasts and takes pride to the angels about the young worshipper, saying, look at my servant, he has left his desires for my sake. Allah takes pride in whose action? Who is granted this status? Religious youth are those who Allah takes pride in front of His malaika, in front of the angels. Which shows us that the actions of youth are of more importance in the eyes of Allah. Now, why are they more important? Allah Himself says in the hadith, تَرَكَ شَهْوَتُهُ مِنْ أَجْلِي. He left his desires for my sake. The deeds of youth are greater because they leave those strong urges and desires for the sake of Allah. And because it's harder for youth to leave their desires and urges for the sake of Allah, they deserve a higher reward and their actions are of much more importance. Another hadith, it's narrated from the Holy Prophet, the virtue of a young worshipper who worships in his youth over an old man who worships in old age is like the virtue of messengers over all other people. This hadith blatantly tells us that deeds that are committed within our youth are of much more importance in the eyes of Allah and hold more value than actions done in old age. And therefore, because they are of more importance, Allah will emphasize what we spend our years of youth on the Day of Judgment. These are two narrations that give us a small insight on how Islam views and values youthhood. The first hadith described it as a blessing that most don't acknowledge the value of. The second describes it as the most crucial stage within our lives, one that we will be held accountable for how we spend it, and one that Allah will emphasize on the Day of Judgment. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.